Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Engineer Your Energy. I'm Caroline Milton, owner of Milton Coaching Collective. Each week, I come live here across multiple platforms to talk about what burnout is, how burnout affects us individually, how stress and burnout affects us organizationally, and the things that we can do to change our relationship to stress and our relationship to burnout. You see, stress isn't bad for you. I feel like that's conversations that we hear all the time. That's messaging that we're hearing is that stress is bad for you. That's not at all the case. Stress can be a very effective tool in terms of how you navigate well-being. But getting stuck in a state of stress, that's what's bad for us, right? So spending the majority of our time with our stress response activated, that's where we start to invite in chronic injury, illness, where we start to see a decline in our performance within our organizations. And so it's important for us to develop tools to successfully navigate our relationship with stress. Now, in these weekly episodes, sometimes I talk about things that we can do as an organization to battle stress and burnout. And sometimes I talk about individual steps that we can take to do the same. This week, I'm talking specifically about individual actions that we can take. These are important to keep in mind as we think about how we do interact or show up in our workplace. So I want to talk today about how you can realize that it is time to deal with stress. Now, I do want to note here, last week, I talked about the difference between stress and stressors in my episode. And if you haven't watched that episode, I definitely recommend whichever platform you're watching on that you go back and you watch that after we finish today, because that is a common misconception that our stress and our stressors are the same thing. So we spend so much time dealing with our stressors, the things that initiate that stress response in our body, that we don't spend enough time addressing that physiological response of stress that leads to us getting stuck in that stress state. So I want to share with you some things to keep an eye out for, behavioral things that might indicate that we need to stop focusing solely on stressors or even on stressors at all. And we need to put all our time, energy, and attention against dealing with our stress. We'll talk more about how to deal with the stress in next week's episode of Engineer Your Energy. Today, I just want to talk about those warning signs. So let's go ahead and dive right in. If you find that you're constantly spinning your wheels, so you're repeating the same thing over and over again, whether that's mindlessly, which is often the case, or even intentionally, but you feel like you're going nowhere, that's oftentimes a sign that our stress response is activated, right? Because when stress is activated, when we're in that stress response mode, different parts of our brain are turned on, other parts of our brain are turned off. That means that we can't necessarily complete specific kinds of tasks that we really need to. Important in the workplace, important anywhere else as well. So if you find that you're constantly spinning your wheels, it may be time to pay attention to your stress. If you find that you're constantly engaging in self-destructive behaviors, right? And there are a lot of self-destructive behaviors that are socially acceptable, right? If you find yourself maybe drinking alcohol on a very regular basis, that's a self-destructive behavior. If you find yourself biting your nails or tearing at your nail beds, those are self-destructive behaviors. You know, I think that term is a very weighty term, and so we tend to think of very dangerous things. But anything that is kind of a way of self-soothing, self-soothing can be a self-destructive behavior. So pay attention to where those creep up in your life. If you find yourself going from 0 to 60, this is sometimes called chandeliering. That's a term that Brene Brown created. But essentially, it's when you feel like you're going from 0 to 60, the snap of a finger, and you don't understand where such an aggressive or intense reaction to a stressor came from, right? Sometimes this happens for me with my child. And of course, that's the last place I want to go from 0 to 60. I want to like casually increase my speed. I don't want to be so reactive. But if we find ourselves regularly going from 0 to 60, or again, chandeliering, that could be a good indication that it's time to focus on the physiological impacts of our stress and getting out of that feeling of stuck, rather than focusing on the thing that's stressing us out. In my case, my toddler. He's not what I need to be focusing on in terms of my own behavior. Instead, I need to be focusing on the stress. The next thing to look out for, behavior number 4, is avoidance, right? So, what we're looking for when we experience a stress input or when we experience a stressor is a sequence of hormones that initiates with adrenaline and cortisol, and it finishes with the release of oxytocin or dopamine, those happy hormones that tell us we're safe. Right. But oftentimes we miss the inputs that say, hey, you're safe here. Right. So we find ourselves still hiding. We're still in that extended state of stress. So if you find yourself feeling like you're hiding or you're avoiding things, good indication that it's time to deal with stress. And the fifth and final thing to look out for is a feeling like your body is kind of foreign to you. Maybe you're experiencing a lot of injury or illness all of a sudden, or maybe you're just feeling some pain and you feel like you can't get over this chronic experience of pain. That is your body's way of telling you, hey, we need to be addressing this, because when we're in a constant state of stress, when our stress response is continuously activated, we're suppressing important functions of our body, like our immune function, like our digestive function. All of these different things that help ensure that our body is able to recover and perform on a daily basis are suppressed because our body thinks it's in a state of survival and it's got to do what it needs to do in order to survive, not in order to thrive. So again, if you find yourself really dealing with these behaviors on a continual basis, that's a good indication that you're towing the line of burnout and it's time to start dealing with your stress. So let's recap those 5 behaviors. Number 1 is spinning your wheels. Number 2 is self-destructive behavior. Number 3 is going from 0 to 60 and how you react or respond to things. Number 4 is avoidant behavior or hiding out from the things that cause you stress. And number 5 is feeling like your body is kind of out of whack. So keep an eye out for those things. If you're struggling with any of those on a continuous basis, please reach out to me. We can do an intake, complimentary consultation in which we dive into the stressors and specifically the stress that you're experiencing. We can begin to develop what that plan might look like for you to build a better toolkit for successfully navigating stress in a way that's health positive. You can reach out to me at miltoncc.com. If you'd like to learn more about how these behaviors impact your place of work and how we can begin to navigate this as a team, also reach out to me at miltoncc.com. This is my area of expertise, my area of passion, because I'm committed to ensuring that our workplaces are thriving, diverse places where we're really thinking creatively and outside the box. As I mentioned, next week, we're going to talk more at length about the things that you can do to navigate your stress and deal with it. Again, if you missed last week's episode, that's a really key one for understanding the context of what we talked about today. You can find that whichever platform you're watching this video, you can look and find last week's episode. So thank you for joining me today. My name is once again Caroline Milton. I'll see you next Thursday for our next episode of Engineer Your Energy. Until then, be well.